Hi, hello, how you doing? My name is Mariana, but you can call me Mari. Welcome or welcome back to my channel. So today, we will be talking about my least favorite books of 2021. So this is going to be all about my own opinions about these books. Obviously, if you really enjoyed them, I'm really happy for you. But me personally, maybe I didn't enjoy them as much. So that's why we're here. I divided this list into two different sections. The first section is my most disappointing books. So these are novels that are good and that have a lot of merit, but that didn't necessarily reach my expectations, or that I was a little bit let down by. And then the second part of this video, I will be talking about the books I didn't like, the books that are my worst books of 2021. So beginning with my most disappointing books of 2021, in no particular order, I want to start by mentioning City of Girls by Elizabeth Gilbert. This is a story of a Vivian, a woman who goes to meet her aunt, who is a showgirl, and she gets involved in this world of showgirls. And she meets all of them and starts building different relationships. And it's kind of an exploration of character, and it's an exploration of the show business in that area. The premise itself sounded extremely interesting. I really liked The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, so I really liked the Hollywood scene. I thought that it was gonna be really fun and that it was going to give me an insight into this whole world, but unfortunately I didn't really like it. Overall, I just found it to be a little bit boring, so that's why it's on this list. Nothing more, nothing less. It was just not for me. Then I want to mention Luster by Raven Leilani. This is a book about a black woman who is exploring her 20s, and she gets involved with a married man and his family. So he has his wife and a little girl who is also black, and she's adopted, and they're both white. And so as she begins to interact with this man, we find out a lot about her relationship to him, her relationship to the daughter, and our protagonist is telling the story through her eyes and her own perspective. But what happened to me when I was reading this book is that I felt like I was reading it from the other side of the glass. Like the story was being told as if somebody was like screaming from another side of a very thick glass that I could barely hear. I can read their lips, but I can't quite comprehend exactly what they're saying. And that's how the book felt to me. I felt like a little distanced from the story. I would have liked a little bit more of maybe exploration of the character and a little bit more of an explanation of what was going on through her head. And it was a little bit distant for me. Then we have Misery by Stephen King. So I'm gonna explain a little bit what Misery is about, even though you probably know what the story is. But it deals with a writer who gets kidnapped by his #1 fan, and then so things start happening from there. This book I always thought I would love, because even though I'm not the biggest Stephen King fan, I thought I would like it because I like gory books and I like body horror. But this book, though it does have those elements, the first 300 pages are so boring. And I felt like Stephen King was writing the perspective of the character from his own perspective. So he was kind of projecting himself into the character, and those long paragraphs when he was describing things and we were stuck in this man's head were a little bit annoying. Again, I know a lot of people like Stephen King and that's why he's a very famous author. I just personally didn't find this book as enjoyable as it could have been if maybe someone else would have written it, if that makes sense. I'm sorry. Then I have Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. Turn of the Key is about a woman who goes to a house to take care of 2 children. So it's a classic haunted house story. And this is an interesting one because I liked the beginning part of the novel. I thought it was a great build-up to what it could have been a really good thriller. But the ending felt like a cop-out. It felt like it just came to a standstill. I thought it was going to deal a little bit more with the paranormal side of the stories, but it found a way to explain it through other things that I didn't really like. So that's why it's on this list of most disappointing books. Then I included Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata. And Convenience Store Woman is a difficult book for me because I really truly enjoyed the premise of the story, and I liked 40% of the book, like the first 40% of the book. It's about a woman who works at a supermarket, and that's it. That's her life. That's all she wants to do. And the rest of her family and people around her find her strange for just wanting to stay in this convenience store. But she likes it. She likes the rhythm of it. She likes that she is good at her job. And that aspect of the novel I found to be very insightful, because it's a perspective that maybe we don't get a lot from. We usually hear about these heroes who are bold and that go out on adventures, which is also great and amazing. But reading from a more real and down-to-earth perspective was very cool. But there's a character that is introduced around the 40%, 45% mark that I hated. He was the most annoying character I've ever had to deal with. And that's the reason why it was very disappointing for me, because I wanted the story to go to a certain place that it didn't. It wasn't necessarily that I wanted her to move on from the store, right? Because that's not the point of the novel. But I didn't like the interactions she had with this character. And though we get maybe 1 or 2 lines about it and kind of criticizing what he is saying and critically thinking about it, it didn't go far enough from me. I wanted the author to go a little bit deeper into what the character was feeling or thinking when this other character came into the story. He was just so annoying, and it was painful to read, honestly. So that's why it's on this list. It's a really good book. I would recommend it, but it was a little bit disappointing for me to find myself hating with such passion a character, and not in a good way, where you read a book and you're interested because of the character dynamic and because you hate the character so much, but rather because the character doesn't add anything more to the story that you already know, and it doesn't add anything to the main character. That was my issue. But maybe some people didn't see it that way, and maybe they really liked the character, so again, I think it's a matter of taste for this one. Then I wanted to mention The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. This was a book that started out incredible. I really like the premise. It's about 2 timelines. One from the perspective of a woman who works as an apothecary in the 1800s, selling poison to women who want to murder their husbands. Really, really interesting premise, right? But the other timeline follows a woman in the present who finds a jar from this apothecary and starts investigating the past. And she is separating from her husband because of an infidelity that is told at the beginning of the novel. That timeline was extremely boring and unrealistic. Like, even if it's not a true story, because obviously it's fiction, the idea of the apothecary was so enthralling and interesting, and I wanted to read from her perspective. But when we got to the present, and that there's this like mystery surrounding what the woman will find and what is happening with her in the present, it kind of cut off the good points of the story. So I felt like I was being immersed into the 1800s, to this woman who's committing crimes, yet we don't get to see her perspective that much, because we get pulled out of the story to go to the present, where we follow kind of a boring character, and I was really frustrated. I think the book could have dealt with just having 1 timeline. It didn't need the 2nd timeline, and that's how I felt about The Lost Apothecary. And if I could just read those parts again about the actual apothecary, I would have liked and enjoyed this book a lot more. So yeah, those are the most disappointing books of 2021 that I wanted to mention. Now we are moving on to the worst books of 2021, the books that I did not like. And these are books that a lot of people on BookTube have either recommended or have mentioned. So that's why I was a little hesitant to maybe mention them. But again, this is my list, so here we are. And it's always nice to hear about other people's opinions, even if they are different from mine. So I'm gonna send you to Mariana from the past to tell you about my worst books of 2021. Yes, this is a transition. For this, I will be going into spoilers. So if you do not want to be spoiled for the 3 books that I will be mentioning in this discussion, then please just jump to the time stamps that I would leave in the description to know which books they are and to know when I will be going into spoilers. So, with that out of the way, now let's begin with my number 3 least favorite book of the year, which is this one. Things have gotten worse since we last spoke. Considering the fact that this book has a beautiful cover and a really engaging title, I thought it was going to be good. I thought it was going to be interesting. I was promised this different format, which I did get, but it wasn't necessarily something that moved the story along. This is about a woman who tries to sell her apple peeler in the internet, and then through that she gets someone who wants to buy it and starts interacting with that person who is a woman, and they start creating this relationship with each other that quickly becomes really twisted and dark. Just mentioning the plot, it sounds interesting. It sounds like something I would read, and that's why I picked it up. The back says sadomasochism, obsession, death, all things that, you know, I'm okay with reading. I don't mind body horror in books, and I don't mind difficult topics. However, I don't mind it when it's done well. In the case of this book, being a short book was the only good thing about it. And I know I'm being really tough, but I didn't like it at all. Going into spoilers for this, once the 2 women start talking and establishing a relationship, the other woman tells her to be her submissive. And that's where the sadomasochism comes from. The protagonist, the character that we're following, she gets obsessed with this other woman and she wants to do anything for her. So if the woman tells her, hey, go kill a snail in the park, she will go do that. And she relates those events to this woman through a chat room and through emails, and she talks about how she hated doing that and how it was horrible for her, but that it made her question things, and then they break off the relationship and then they come back together. And this whole conflict is seen through the eyes of them being gay as like the main issue, and I didn't like that. I didn't like that being gay was like the whole problem here. I didn't find it realistic. I didn't find it compelling. I thought the writing was pretty bad, pretty choppy. The cover of the novel is absolutely stunning, but that's pretty much the only thing I liked about it. So I also didn't like the ending. I thought it was kind of stupid. I'm sorry, but her peeling her eyes out, one, wouldn't necessarily kill her, I don't think. You know, I don't know much about anatomy, but I just don't think that's like a life-threatening injury. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but just those aspects of the novel made it so ridiculous to the point where I just couldn't find it interesting. So yeah, this is my number 3, and I will probably be donating this book. So yeah, this is my 3rd least favorite book of this year, and I will probably be keeping it just because I like the cover. Moving on to my 2nd least favorite book of the year is I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. A lot of people love this book, and a lot of people like the show, which I totally understand to some extent, because I think that the novel is not only kind of choppy in its writing, and the genius of it just isn't conveyed in the way that it could have. This is a novel that follows a couple. We follow the female, the woman in this relationship, as she is thinking of ending things, of ending the relationship with this man. And we follow their timeline and their relationship, and we quickly catch on to the fact that she is an unreliable narrator, that these things may not have happened exactly as she is telling them. Again, a very compelling story. I really liked the way it was told. It kept me reading. It was scary at some points. Like, I was reading it at night and thinking to myself, okay, maybe I should read this in the morning because it's getting to me. But unfortunately, once I got to the end of the novel, it became clear that the author, I don't know if he knew exactly where he wanted to take it. Again, I will go into spoilers for this, but the end of the novel is that we find out that the whole time we have actually been following Jake instead of the woman. That turns out that they are the same person. And Jake is a janitor who has been working for 30 years and is very antisocial and has a lot of mental issues. And he starts this story by writing about an encounter he had with a woman at a bar that didn't go anywhere because he was too shy to ask for her number. And then this is where the story picks up of what could have happened if they had established this relationship. The issue with this is that this is all through the lens of him having dissociative identity disorder. That's how I interpreted it, and that's mainly what people say on the internet, is that that's the whole reason he is kind of having these two personalities throughout the novel. And he ends up killing himself in this closet where supposedly the woman was kidnapped. She starts realizing, oh, we're the same person and we're gonna kill ourselves. And I hated it. I hated that the scapegoat of the novel was to say that he was mentally ill and that he had dissociative identity disorder, and that was the whole thing. Again, I thought it was going to go into a different direction. It got really dark when we go into a school and there's this man who's a janitor who is kind of stalking this couple, and the main love interest, the man, goes into the school and then gets lost in the school, so we can't find him, and the woman goes after him. And this whole sequence was so enthralling and it kept me reading, and then we get to the ending and we find out that it was all just a mental health crisis, and it was used as a mechanism for telling the story. And I didn't like it. So yeah, that's why I personally wouldn't read it again. I wouldn't recommend it. If you like it, I'm glad, but I don't understand why people, after reading the ending, still like the novel. Maybe it's because of the whole process of reading it, which is, again, engaging and interesting. But for me, the ending of the novel is not the most important thing. But when the ending of the novel changes the perspective of the novel completely, and we find that it's a completely different story from what we have been reading, that pisses me off. If it's not done in a way that makes sense or that doesn't feel like a cop-out. And this felt like a cop-out for the author. Maybe he didn't know how to end it, or maybe he thought about this all along, but just kind of the way it ended left me really angry, and I got really angry right now. Okay, so just so that the anger doesn't keep on rising as I talk about my last and my most hated novel of the year, I will go get a glass of water and I will come back. Okay, so let's talk about my least favorite book of 2021. The book I hated, I forgot about it, and now I'm here to talk about it. It's called Angels and Demons by Dan Brown. Another very famous author, and I honestly don't understand why it's so famous. Sorry. I've read so many thriller novels over the years, and suspense novels, and adventure novels, and everything that this book wanted to be, and just didn't reach any expectation at all. This was about a man who was... I can't even remember exactly what it was about. I know that there was a bomb that he had to stop, connecting it to the Vatican and the Catholic Church, and there was a lot of discussions about religion, and that's why it's called Angels and Demons. But again, after I read it, it was a mixture of feelings. I was confused because most of the novel I was really confused, and then I was angry that I wasted so many hours listening to the audiobook to get an underwhelming and unrealistic conclusion. And you can see that all these 3 books have really bad endings, and it feels like that's a factor that makes these books so bad. But in this particular novel, I was left with this feeling of, I don't know why it has so much hype. I wish I was smart enough to understand it, I guess. After I finished reading it, I went online just to see what people thought about it. And apparently I'm not the only one who feels this way about this novel, especially in the more religious discussions and philosophical discussions that the author didn't do any research for. And you can tell that he had no idea what he was talking about. He was just bullshitting his way through this novel, and you can tell. I don't know how he got past the drafting process, honestly, and how nobody was like, oh, maybe you shouldn't include this. For example, he talked about in this novel, and somebody on Goodreads pointed this out, and I thought it was incredible. The fact that this author talked about the fact that supposedly the Christians started this sacrifice, this tradition of talking about sacrifices because of the Aztecs. And that's just not true. They weren't inspired by the Aztecs. And honestly, because the Christians came first. We're talking about completely different timelines. So what are you talking about, Dan Brown? And then he would throw in these like very smart-ass claims that were just untrue, and you can tell that he didn't do his research to write this novel. So why write it at all? Why write a novel talking about the Catholic Church in such a negative light if you're not going to do some research on it and be critical about it? You can be critical about it, but you have to at least have some proof about what you're talking about, even if it's a fiction novel. If it's a fiction novel, then happening in a different timeline, then okay. But this was set in the real life. So it was very infuriating to read such claims. And then the ending of the novel was so unrealistic that I was left dumbfounded by the fact that this author thought that this was a perfect conclusion to the novel. After this supposedly bomb goes off, spoilers, the narrator, the main character of the story, goes on an airplane to get the bomb away from the planet. And so the character goes into the sky, gets the bomb out of the way, and obviously I thought, okay, he died. He made a sacrifice. He's dead. And after reading 700 pages, luckily it was an audiobook because I don't think I would have been able to read it visually with my own eyes. This character apparently survived the bomb. He had it all prepared. There was this huge trampoline thing that caught him from falling and dying out of the sky. And honestly, if you don't die in an explosion, you're lucky. And then if you don't die by falling from the sky, from that height, somehow you get caught in a web. It's just... And how was he supposed to know exactly where he was falling? And that's another thing, like, oh, he's so smart, that's how he knew. But I don't believe it. I just don't believe you, Dan Brown. And it makes me mad. And this is the longest book I read this year. This book was the longest book, according to Goodreads. So, I don't know why I didn't just DNF it, honestly. It would have been better for me, for my mental health, to just forget about it completely and not even talk about it. But since I finished it, it is my least favorite book of this year. And I will not be reading any other books by Dan Brown, because I don't think he's a good writer. That may be a hot claim, and that may get me into trouble with some of you. And some of you may love this author, and I'm really, really sorry if I have offended you with my opinions. But these are my opinions. So, yeah. These are my most disappointing and most hated books of 2021. I knew I was gonna get mad, but wow. Dan Brown, I'm coming for your ass. For writing such trash. I'm sorry. Okay, anyways. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching this. Hopefully my next videos will be a little bit more positive. I have spent all my energy ranting about these last 3 books, as I knew I would. So yeah, tell me about your least favorite books. I would love to hear it. thank you for being here. I hope you enjoyed this video to some extent. I'm sorry again if you really like these books, but tell me in the comments why and let's discuss. It's always interesting to hear other people's opinions. I love discussions, so hopefully my next video will be a little bit more positive. I am done ranting about these books. I will put them out of my mind, especially the last one, and I will see you all in my next video. Have an amazing week. Bye!